Chapter 1: The Unlikely Housemates. Bubbles had no idea how he got here. One moment, he was swimming in a big tank at the pet store, watching people's faces press against the glass. The next thing he knew, he was scooped up, swirled around in a plastic bag, and plopped into a small round bowl on a wooden table. He wiggled his fins and blinked his big round fish eyes. The water was clean, the bowl was shiny, and there was even a tiny castle inside. Okay, he said to himself, this isn't so bad. But then he saw it. A pair of giant yellow eyes staring at him from the edge of the table. A fluffy tail twitched behind them. A pair of furry paws crept forward one step at a time. Bubbles gulped. Meow, said the cat, peering into the bowl. Bubbles gasped. A monster! A giant, furry, whiskery, fish-eating monster! He quickly puffed up his fins and blew a stream of bubbles straight at the cat's nose. Bloop! The cat blinked and twitched his nose. Then he reached out a paw very slowly. Bubbles flapped his tail. Nope! Stay back, you fluffy beast! I'm small, but I'm slippery! The cat pulled his paw back and narrowed his eyes. He sat down and stared at Bubbles. His tail swished, first left, then right. He didn't blink, not even once. Bubbles didn't blink either. They sat like that for a long time. The little girl of the house, Sophie, walked by and laughed. Looks like Whiskers and Bubbles are getting to know each other, she said. No, that was not what was happening. Whiskers thought Bubbles was a snack, and Bubbles thought Whiskers was trouble, and neither of them was happy about it. Chapter 2: Unexpected Friendship. Bubbles and Whiskers did not get along. Every day, Whiskers sat by the fishbowl, staring. He never blinked, he never moved, just sat there watching. Bubbles tried everything to get him to go away. He swam in fast circles, whoosh, whoosh. He blew extra big bubbles, bloop. He even tried floating upside down to see if Whiskers would get bored. Nope, Whiskers just kept watching. His tail flicked every few seconds. Left, right, left, right. Finally, one afternoon, Bubbles couldn't take it anymore. He swam up to the glass and puffed out his tiny fish chest. All right, listen here, Fuzzy, I'm not a snack, I'm not a toy. Go stare at something else. Whiskers blinked slowly. Then he did something strange. He stood up, stretched his paws forward, and rolled onto his back. Bubbles tilted his head. The big fluffy cat started wiggling. He swayed side to side, paws in the air, belly all exposed. Then whump! Whiskers rolled right off the table. Bubbles gasped. He swam up to the edge of the bowl. Are you okay? From the floor, Whiskers purred. Then something even stranger happened. The cat stood up, padded over to the kitchen, and gently picked up a tiny crumb with his mouth. He trotted back to the table, plopped it next to the bowl, and sat down with a proud look on his face. Bubbles stared at the crumb, then back at Whiskers. Wait a minute, are you giving me a present? Whiskers blinked slowly, his tail curling happily. Bubbles bubbled up a laugh. I don't even eat crumbs, you silly cat. Whiskers let out a soft meow and gave the crumb a little paw tap. Bubbles sighed and pretended to nibble on it. Delicious. You're a very good hunter. Whiskers purred loudly. Maybe, just maybe, this giant fluff monster wasn't so bad after all. And maybe, just maybe, they could be friends. Chapter 3: The Leap of Trouble. Bubbles and Whiskers were friends now. Unlikely friends, but friends all the same. Every morning, Whiskers would sit by the fishbowl, purring softly. Every afternoon, Bubbles would splash tiny water droplets at Whiskers just to see him wiggle his nose. Every evening, Whiskers would bring tiny food crumbs and set them next to the bowl like little gifts. Bubbles would pretend to eat them and thank him politely. Life was pretty good, but something was still missing. Bubbles wanted to play, really play, not just splash and stare, not just pretend to eat crumbs. He wanted to chase and run and roll around just like Whiskers. And then Bubbles got an idea, a very, very bad idea. He stared at Whiskers, who was lying on his back, paws in the air, tail twitching happily. Bubbles wiggled his fins, he wiggled his tail, he wiggled his whole fishy body, and then, whoosh, he leaped. For one glorious second, Bubbles was flying. The air felt cool on his scales, the world looked huge, he could see everything. And then, splat, right onto the floor. Oh, Bubbles gasped, his little fish mouth opening and closing. Oh no, this was a mistake. Whiskers leapt to his feet. His tail puffed up like a bottle brush. His eyes went wide as saucers. Bubbles flopped. His fins flapped. His gills gulped at the air. Whiskers, help! Bubbles wheezed. Whiskers panicked. He ran in a circle, then he ran in another circle, then he sat down and stared at Bubbles. "Don't just stare! Do something!" Whiskers' ears perked up. Then, very, very gently, he reached out a paw and scooped up Bubbles. Bubbles held his breath. Whiskers lifted him carefully, patted over to the fishbowl, and plip! Dropped Bubbles right back into the water. Bubbles sank to the bottom, then popped back up. He gulped in fresh water, wiggled his fins, and sighed. "Okay," he panted. "Bad idea." Whiskers flopped onto his side, exhausted. His tail twitched, his ears twitched, his whiskers twitched. Then splash! Bubbles flicked his tail and sent a tiny spray of water right at Whiskers' nose. The cat sneezed, Bubbles laughed, Whiskers purred. Even though the whole thing had been terrifying, Bubbles had to admit, it was kind of fun. But there was still one big problem. They wanted to play together, and jumping out of the bowl was definitely not the way to do it. Chapter 4. A Brilliant Human Saves the Day. The next morning, Sophie, the little girl who lived in the house, walked into the room with her cereal. She froze. Something was different. Whiskers was lying next to the fishbowl, looking extra fluffy, like he had seen a ghost. Bubbles was swimming in slow circles, bubbling nervously, and there was a tiny wet spot on the floor. Sophie narrowed her eyes. "What happened here?" Whiskers twitched his whiskers. Bubbles blooped. Sophie crossed her arms. "You two are up to something." Whiskers purred loudly, his best "I'm an innocent kitty" trick. Bubbles just kept swimming, pretending to be the most normal fish in the world. But Sophie was smart. She had been watching them for weeks. She knew something fishy was going on. Then she saw it. Whiskers' tail was still a little wet. Sophie gasped. "Did you jump out of the bowl, Bubbles?" Bubbles stopped swimming. Whiskers let out a guilty meow. Sophie put her hands on her hips. "You two really want to play together, don't you?" Whiskers flicked his tail. Bubbles did a tiny loop in the water. Sophie sighed, then smiled. "Well, if you can't come out of the water, maybe I can bring the water to you." Whiskers and Bubbles exchanged a look. What did that mean? Sophie ran off to her room and came back with her invention kit. She pulled out tape, plastic, tubes, wires, and a big round container. She scribbled on a notepad measuring Whiskers' back and Bubbles' bowl. She mumbled words like balance, water flow, and secure straps. Bubbles blinked. Whiskers yawned and flopped onto his back, swiping lazily at a pencil. Then hours later, Sophie held up a tiny water-filled tank with straps. It looked just like a tiny backpack. She beamed. "Ta-da! The catfish tank!" Bubbles wiggled his fins. What?" Sophie carefully strapped it onto Whiskers' back. The cat sat very still, his tail flicking curiously. Then she scooped Bubbles into his new mini tank. Bubbles swam in a circle. It was small, but the water was clean and fresh. Sophie stepped back. "All right, Whiskers, go for a walk." Whiskers took a step. The water sloshed. Bubbles swirled in a loop-de-loop. Whiskers took another step. The water swooshed. Bubbles spun like a tiny goldfish tornado. Then Whiskers zoomed across the room. Bubbles whooshed inside the tank. Whee! Bubbles cheered. Meow, meow. Whiskers meowed excitedly. Sophie clapped her hands. "It works. You guys can play together now." Bubbles laughed. Whiskers purred. It was the best idea ever. Chapter 5. The Best Playtime Ever. Whiskers pranced around the room, his tail flicking excitedly. On his back, Bubbles swirled and looped inside his tiny water tank, his little fins flapping with joy. Whee! Bubbles cheered as Whiskers zoomed past the couch. Meow! Whiskers purred as he leapt onto a chair, then hopped back down again. Sophie giggled. "I think you two just invented a new game." Whiskers proudly strutted around, showing off his brand new fish backpack. Bubbles, feeling braver than ever, blew tiny happy bubbles inside the tank. But then, Whiskers got an idea. He crouched low, his fluffy bottom wiggling. His eyes locked onto something round and shiny, Sophie's favorite bouncy ball. With one big pounce, Whiskers batted it across the room. It rolled, right toward the kitchen. Meow! Whiskers sprinted after it. Whoop! Bubbles spun inside his tank. The ball hit the fridge and bounced back. Whiskers leapt into the air and smacked it across the floor again. Bubbles rolled in circles, laughing. "I love this game," Sophie clapped. "You guys made bouncy fish ball." Whiskers pounced, swiped, and chased the ball, making sure to keep Bubbles safe and steady on his back. Bubbles zoomed through the air with every jump, feeling like a bird, a dolphin, and a race car all at the same time. Finally, Whiskers flopped onto the rug, exhausted. Bubbles floated happily, still giggling inside his tiny tank. That, Bubbles panted, was amazing. Whiskers let out a big, satisfied purr. Sophie smiled. You two are the coolest best friends ever. Chapter 6, A Friendship for Life. That night, the house was quiet and cozy. The moonlight glowed softly through the windows, casting gentle shadows on the floor. The house was asleep. But inside one little room, something new and special had begun. Whiskers curled up next to the fishbowl, his tail wrapped around himself like a fluffy donut. His ears twitched as he let out a deep, happy purr. Inside his tiny water tank, now safely back in the fishbowl, Bubbles floated peacefully. He blew soft little bubbles that drifted to the top, making the tiniest bloop, bloop, bloop sounds. The two friends were tired from all the excitement, but they were happier than ever. Bubbles peeked over at Whiskers. Hey, Whiskers? The cat's ears perked up. Bubbles smiled. That was the best day ever. Whiskers stretched out his paws and let out a tiny sleepy meow. He agreed. Bubbles floated to the top of the bowl and whispered, Best friends forever? Whiskers gave the tiniest, sleepiest purr. He blinked slowly, the way cats say, I love you. Bubbles blew one last happy bubble before closing his eyes. Whiskers curled up tighter, his tail twitching just once before he drifted into a deep, peaceful sleep. And as the house stayed still and quiet, one little goldfish and one fluffy cat dreamed of all the games they would play tomorrow. The end.